Hello Frizzle Frontier! Out of the last 16 books I read, the ones that I had the least fun reading were Foundryside and Locklands. These are books 1 and 3 in a trilogy that I've really been looking forward to reading. Yes, I skipped book 2, it's part of a plan, I've got an experiment going on reading series out of order, got it? I'll make a video about my conclusions eventually and I'll link it down in the footnotes when I do. It might be a little while though, because I need lots more data points before I can make any conclusions. So let's talk about Foundryside first. My biggest beef with this book is I didn't understand why the characters were doing what they were doing. On a macro scale, what are their big goals? What do they want out of life? I did understand that, and the book definitely conveyed that to me well. But on a micro level of why are they doing this task? Why do they want to do this? That was the missing link. And then because of that, the book felt very disjointed, especially the farther we got into the book and the more I kept questioning, wait, why? The main premise of the world is we've got our upper nobility class that are super fancy and rich, and then we've got the suppressed lower class. The upper class get all their wealth mostly through selling objects of the magic system, which is they can use special runes to tap into an object's fundamental kind of source code. Like they might make a wheel think it is constantly falling so that it kind of turns without any force behind it, which is a pretty smart magic system, and I will say, at least in book 1, was applied pretty well. But by book 3, it was getting a little stretched out. I rated book 1 2 stars, and book 3 I rated 3 stars. And how do I talk about book 3 without spoiling anything? Book 3 improved upon the lackluster micro-character motivations problem that I had with book 1. But I felt like it established a few new problems. One, the magic just kept getting more and more complicated and less grounded, and even though they gave me nice diagrams to look at, I couldn't follow some of the magic logic. And personally, I think by the time you're resorting to diagrams in a novel, like, you've already failed. And then the ending of book 3 was so grand, but it didn't feel earned thematically to me. You'll have to read it and form your own opinions if you want. And book 14 on my ranked list is One Foot in the Fade, which I despised. And usually when I dislike a book this much, I have to take a step back and say, you know, I'm probably not the intended audience for this. Maybe someone else would jive with it way better. It's not like it's objectively bad, it's just my opinion. But this book had the gall to start out its blurb with this sentence: "A darkly imagined world perfect for readers of Ben Aronovich and Jim Butcher. I am the intended audience." And so I feel no guilt in saying that this book was a 1-star read for me. It was so incredibly info-dumpy to ridiculous levels. The main character over and over would be telling people things that they didn't need to know, that he didn't need to tell them, just so that the reader could get the information. It didn't make any sense in context. And one of the big themes and forces in this novel is industrialization versus magic, where our main character is pro-magic, and then his nemesis is pro-industrialization. But the most ridiculous thing about this book is that it didn't ever sell me on why the industrialization was bad. Mr. Evil Businessman Nemesis over there is paying his workers well, funding public libraries, helping out public works projects. And you know what the magic brings in this book? Disaster. So I never even wanted to root for the main character. He was just stupid and a walking exposition dump, and his moral arguments didn't make any sense in the context of the story. But it did beat out the Foundryside series because I had a lot of fun at the very beginning of this book trying to come up with reasons why the main character was being so info-dumpy. Here's the best theory I came up with. The reason that our protagonist walks up to people and is like, "What do you know about this event where this happened and this happened and this happened with this people and this person?" The reason the main character does that is because he is secretly psychic. And through prompting the people to think through it deeply and to think through all of these little parts, he can better read the information out of their mind connected to the event. Now that's false, but it would have made a better book. I also had fun trying to figure out the beef between protagonist and evil businessman. They used to be in a romantic relationship and had a messy breakup, and now there's just a bunch of angst between them. Also false, but I think that also would have made a more interesting book than the one we got. And over this past month, I had a lot of craving for trying to find new books. So a lot of the books I've read have been new releases that I searched out, and books that might be a little bit more outside my wheelhouse. Number 13 is Hunger of the Gods. This book is all plot and very little character. It's the second book in an epic fantasy series that is very Norse mythology inspired, and those parts were pretty cool. There are a bunch of different main characters throughout this book that all have their own quests. Most of them various revenge-driven quests, which first the book didn't really sell me on like why we needed these revenge quests. Like I didn't feel emotionally compelled by any of them. So it was mostly just like action scenes with characters that I didn't care about doing political things that like had cool connections to Norse deities, but But I must give credit where credit is due. This book wonderfully starts out with a summary of book 1 and a character list. That was incredibly helpful, and I didn't realize how much I needed this in books until I had it. So all the other authors, please take notes. I rated this book 3 stars. Number 12, we have Take a Hint, Dani Brown. I don't read a lot of contemporary romance. This was another reaching a little bit outside my comfort zone book. And I do think I reached a little too hard because I was pretty bored and I was like, can't we just get a side plot about like killing zombies or something, please? This is part of a series that I've heard so many good things about, the Brown sisters. And I decided to start with this book about Dani because I felt like I could relate to her character journey the most from what I've heard about it. Dani is a very focused on work literature teacher, but is terrified of getting into a committed relationship because she's been hurt before. Her love interest, Zephyr, is very interested in a committed long-term relationship. That is what he's searching for, and he's a hopeless romantic. And then they go into like a fake dating pact with each other to support his charity work. But there's something about this book that really bothered me on a thematic level. Dani's arc of learning to accept commitment and emotional vulnerability was good, but Zephyr's arc turned more into needs to take a step back and take sex a little less seriously. But I don't really feel like wanting a committed relationship is a character flaw that needs to be overcome. And it's especially icky to me that Zephyr is kind of touted in the book as Muslim representation. And yes, he is non-practicing, but it's like, what was the point of making this character Muslim if 1, you're gonna make him non-practicing? And then 2, if you're going to have his arc going against some of the fundamental teachings of Islam? Going against his cultural religious heritage? And I'll link some reviews in the footnotes by actual Muslim people talking about this in more detail and care than I can manage. I rated this book 2 stars. I ranked Ascendant in spot number 11. I know like Dragon Rider fantasy is kind of its own subgenre of fantasy, but this was kind of my first foray into that. This is a fairly vanilla, chosen one, boy becomes Dragon Rider accidentally kind of story. But one of the little flavor sprinkles in there is that his dragon is blind. So he kind of acts as the seeing eye human to his dragon, which honestly, I feel like in this book was underutilized. Let's put this in context of like Sanderson's laws of writing. The second law is that limitations are more interesting than powers. And you would think that by giving the dragon such a integral limitation that it could create more plot and emotional conflict in the story. But honestly, I feel like you could take out this detail and replace it with purple spots on his ears as his physical deformity that the dragon shunned him for, and nothing about the story would really change. Which was disappointing because that's why I wanted to pick this book up. But the thing about this book that irked me more and more the farther we got into the book is that it prioritized expanding the lore and the magic and the history and the world over character work like every single time. Like a few times something bad would happen in the story and you would think that this is the moment where we could get the grieving feelings of the characters and really delve into it and what does this mean to them, but then we would quickly pivot from that into explaining a new element of the magic or a flashback to the history of the world or this or that, and I only care about your world building if it's connected to the character journeys, which is why I'm reading these books anyway. So I would recommend this book to A, people who love Dragon Rider fantasy, and B, people who love world building. But if you're also a person who really, really loves character arcs and emotions, no. I rated this book 2 stars. Number 10, Blood and Moonlight. This book is half murder mystery and half historical fantasy young adult romance. And honestly, I felt like the murder mystery was the better done of the 2 halves. This book follows Kat, a teenage construction inspector who works at the cathedral. And she accidentally gets entangled in a hunt for a serial killer, as she also develops a crush for the investigator and discovers her hidden magical heritage. Like I said, the murder mystery part was my favorite because it definitely laid out its clues. Great. I thought I had it figured out about halfway through the book, and then I ended up not having it figured out at all. So that was a great twist, and it was really well done there. I rated this book 3 stars. Number 9 is This Vicious Grace. This is another YA fantasy action romance, but for this one, the better half was definitely the romance. This book follows Alessa, who is the chosen one with powers that will be able to stop the incoming monster horde. But she can't control the powers, and consequently, she just kind of kills everyone she touches. So there's a bunch of pressure for her to figure this out now, time to train, time to become the chosen one because we need you. And throughout the book is her self-actualization of slowly coming to terms with the guilt of accidentally killing those people before, and also her place as the chosen one, as she also falls in love with one of her guards. And I loved how raw and emotional this book wasn't afraid to get. I definitely felt for these characters so much. And that element of the raw feelings is what I really like about a lot of young adult novels, because they do tend to have more of that than ones aimed at adults. But saying that, I think this book probably should be aimed at adults seems a little bit more spicy than that. I rated this book 3 stars. For spot number 8 on this list, I went way outside my wheelhouse and picked up The 13 Problems by Agatha Christie. And given that all the Agatha Christie novels are the classics, I was kind of expecting this to be, kind of boring, as many classics are. But I was blown away by how modern all of these little mystery short stories were. It definitely felt like these plots could be picked up and plopped right into a crime TV show today. Where this book fell flat for me, honestly, was the main character herself, the detective, Miss Marple. Because in this book, each chapter has a different character telling the mystery to the other characters, and they all try to kind of solve it as part of their Tuesday Murder Club. But honestly, the narrator that I enjoyed reading from the least was Miss Marple, because she didn't have a lot of showmanship in her mystery, because to her it was oh, well, it's obvious. I'm just telling you the story of how it happened, right? So this book made me want to read more of Agatha Christie, but not necessarily more of the Miss Marple books by Agatha Christie, I rated this book 3 stars. Number 7, Upgrade. This book is a page turner. In the end, I think it's much more about philosophical ideas than it is about its own characters. The characters in the story aren't bad, they just seem to take a back seat to the story that is actually being told here. This book is kind of asking and answering the question of what is a perfect human? And our main character finds himself, unwillingly, turned into the next superhuman, awesome intellect, perfect muscles. And then the book is him coming to terms with that, and also trying to decide if the rest of humanity should also have this upgrade, and should he fight for or against that. I rated this book 4 stars. Number 6 is Eclipse the Moon. This book is half sci-fi espionage, half romance. And I was definitely rooting for this romance, and also for the spy espionage plot, but for both of the plots, it felt like we could use a little bit more drama. The plots were high stakes and well done, but both relatively low angst. We could have had some more drama in there. And I think the book could have been better with it. But what I want to highlight of the good qualities of this book is our main character, Key. Because she felt so unique in that she didn't fit into any one stereotypical character box. She's emotionally strong in that she's mature and makes good emotional decisions, but also her tear ducts are just so overactive, and she's tearing up over the tiniest things and kind of hates her own eyes for that. She's outgoing and sassy and dyes her hair rainbow colors, but she's also a hyper-focused hacker who takes her job so seriously. She's courageous and good under pressure, but also she's absolutely terrible in a physical fight. She's just this little ball of contrasts and contradictions that was really fun to read and always felt internally consistent within her character. I rated this book 4 stars. And after all of those new books and fresh releases going outside of my wheelhouse in genre, I felt like I needed a return to the books that I love. And so, numbers 2 through 5 is my reread of the Alpha and Omega series, the prologue, and then books 2, 3, 4. And the more I reread these books and the deeper I get into them, the more I love them. The Alpha and Omega series follows a couple, Anna and Charles, who are both werewolves. Charles is Mr. Serious Grumpy, who has been the werewolf detective slash executioner for a very long time. And Anna is just being introduced to the werewolf world and finding out how to support her love interest in his job and finding ways that she can help and do it even better than he can in a lot of ways. And each book is them going on a new little adventure and has a nice mystery plot and also often has really good character development. But they both get their own plots and emotional voice and world, and their relationship as it deepens over the series is so fun to watch. My favorite of these books is book 3, Fair Game. And what I noticed about it this time was just how incredibly rich Charles's arc is. Because in this book, he's grappling with a lot of the guilt from being aforementioned executioner, and for some calls he's had to make that he regrets in retrospect. And then the action framework of the story is Charles and Anna are consulting for the human FBI as they try to track down a serial killer who is targeting werewolves. So we're putting our werewolf characters out of their comfort zone by pairing them with the FBI. We're giving ourselves awesome new characters in all of those agents that they're working with. And we're also giving a contrast between Charles's werewolf-style justice and the justice system of the FBI United States. And then of course we get so many great dramatic moments of him working through those issues through that context that he's able to get, and also with Anna helping him, who is also coming into her own as a leader in this book, especially because Charles isn't in the emotional place to go into the leadership role that he usually is ready to. And so she steps up instead. And so we see a shifting balance in their relationship as a couple, and both of them growing stronger because of it. I rated these books on average 4.5 stars, and I love them. And in number 1, the book that I had the most fun reading is The Stardust Thief. This is a book inspired by 1001 Nights, the Middle Eastern folk tales. And I know me saying that it reminded me of Aladdin is just because, like, Aladdin is the only other inspired by 1001 Nights thing that I've, like, consumed. But I still want to say it because I think it's a compliment. And from the moment where our main character turned to her parental figure and said, "I wish you were in your lizard shape," I was hooked on this book. In some moments, it is campy and goofy, and in some moments, it is grand and mythological. And there are so many secrets in this book. And we get multiple narrators and perspectives, so there's so much dramatic irony because of those important secrets, because you know the secrets, even if this character doesn't or that character doesn't, and you're just waiting for those secrets to come out, and when they do, it is emotionally resonant and beautiful because you knew from the beginning how important that secret would be and how big it would be when it came out. And so every little scene has its own little conflicts and tensions because of all of those secrets and ironies and conflicts between different characters as they travel together on a quest. Now, I rated this book 3 stars, which might confuse you if you've been paying attention to it being number 1 on this ranked list. But this book was like a 5-star book for me until I got to the end. And then it got demoted to 3 stars. But until the end, I was enjoying it enough to place it up here on this list. And so here it reigns. Now the ending, without spoiling it, my problems were, 1, it left too many plot threads unresolved in an unsatisfying way for the sequel to pick up, but it still didn't feel like I was reading a satisfying ending. And 2, some of the character arcs, especially in like the last third of the book, didn't feel earned with the setup in the first 2/3 of the book. And it really bothered me there. And 3, there are some consequences that happen to these characters that I really respected, some real limitations and setbacks because of their actions from earlier in the book. But then in the end, some of these were just undo, Control-Z, and that also irked me. And those are the last 16 books I read. What did you think of these books? What have you been reading? Let me know in the comments, and thank you for watching.